and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So we're definitely at the time of year where things are growing several inches a day. Some of these things, I just can't believe how fast they're growing. So without further ado, let's do this week's garden update. One of the most impressive things in the garden right now, and one of the things that has grown the most, is this birdhouse gourd. I think last week it was barely starting to touch the trellis, and now it's climbed probably at least 7 feet. We don't have any flowers quite yet, but they are not far behind. They've put out all kinds of these really cool tendrils. These are my favorite. The loofah gourd isn't as big, but I don't know, this is the first time I have grown loofah and birdhouse gourd, so maybe this is going to catch up. And last week, I think we were barely starting to see flowers on this Molly's ground cherry. And this week, we have some immature fruit. All of the ground cherries that we have in the garden this year are volunteers, which means I didn't plant the seed. They just came back from seed that fell from last year's plants. And that's kind of the thing with ground cherries. You have to sort of wait until they are yellow and papery and essentially fall off of the plant before they are really the best eating quality. And so inevitably, some of them fall off of the plant without you noticing, and they readily come back. There's a couple here. These are the ones we were just looking at. There's some back there. I had actually transplanted some over on this side. So we've got some ground cherries over here by the peppers. I'm barely starting to notice tiny little flower buds coming on the peppers. So these guys will start fruiting very soon. And I brought my chair over here so that maybe we can see what these sunflowers are doing. Nothing yet, but we're getting close. Over here on this end of the garden, you can see we've got a couple different varieties of different puff balls. This here is the bloom of an elephant garlic. So we harvested elephant garlic a couple weeks ago, and I left a couple of these in the ground because I really wanted to see what these looked like. And you might not think that something like this, or the onion blooms that are over there, those white ones, would be the favorite of pollinators, but I have seen tons and tons of bumblebees, honeybees, wasps. I know we don't like those things, but they are pollinators all over these little guys. And so I don't know exactly what they're getting from it. I don't know if they're really going after it for nectar or for pollen, but whatever it is, they love it. So you can see here I have unearthed a couple of our sad little onions, and these are really not much bigger at all than they were when I put them in. See, here's one right here. This one probably isn't bigger than it was when I put it in the ground. And actually, these are the saddest onions that I have ever grown. Usually I do plant these onion sets, and I don't have a terrible time with it. Usually onion sets will go to flower like you see here, but it hasn't been a big deal to me because I have gotten sizable onions from them in the past. This year it is not the case. I don't know what the difference is, but it's actually okay. We can get onions pretty easily at the Amish market that we shop at, and so I don't really need to grow all kinds of onions. But I'm excited that these guys have flowered because it means that I can collect seed and grow onions from seed next year, and those guys shouldn't flower. Onions are biennial, and so they will put on their flowers in their second year. And when you buy these little onion sets at the store, these are first year onions. So when you plant them and they come back to life, it is their second year. And so more often than not, they will flower like this. Let's see, this is what they look like when they are open. And then when all of the flowers have been pollinated, they kind of look like this. The little seeds are starting to develop in there, and we'll be able to harvest them real soon. So we're actually slotted to get a whole bunch of rain this week, and when that happens, I really like to put as many seeds in the ground as I can. So when we harvested the elephant garlic, this bed got kind of roughed up. So underneath is lovely, lovely soil, and then I had about probably 2 inches of this mulch, and when I unearthed the garlic, some of that mulch did kind of mix in with the soil, which really isn't ideal. When mulch gets down underneath the soil surface, it actually acts to really rob the soil of the nitrogen that is within the soil. It takes a lot of nitrogen to break down big barky pieces like this. So when those big barky pieces are near where your plant's roots are trying to, you know, take up nutrients for the plants, your plants can really suffer and not get what they need. So the way that I'm going to combat that a little bit is actually I'm going to plant my seeds, my corn seeds, within some of this garden soil. There are fertilizers in this soil, and that should help balance things out. So right about every 6 inches, I'm going to be making a well in the bed and placing in some garden soil, and then we'll put the corn in. The general rule of thumb when planting anything is to plant the seed twice as deep as it is wide. So you can see this corn seed here is probably a little bit over 1/4 inch in diameter, or the width, I guess, no matter how you slice it, it's about a little bit over 1/4 inch. And so I'm going to put that about a 1/2 inch down, and that will be perfect. Over here in these nightshade beds, we've got tomatoes on the trellis, which are starting to fruit. We'll look at those in a second. Our peppers down here, much like the peppers in the other part of the garden, are starting to flower. Look at that. The eggplant that I planted still has what really looks like terrible flea beetle damage. The plants are growing. Because we're going to get some rain real soon, I'm not going to treat them. We're just going to have to wait and see how they do. That one might be trying to flower. I think I only successfully grew eggplant one time, and I think we only got 1 eggplant off of the plant. So I don't know if that was technically a success or not, but I probably won't stop trying. But you can see here, we've planted some beans kind of in amongst these nightshades in here. These are contender bush beans. It's my first year growing those. It is a favorite of some of the other homesteading YouTube channels, and so I wanted to try it out. But I actually have a whole bunch of bean seeds that I bought a couple years ago, and I really want this to be a pretty massive bean year for us this year. We had a horrible bean year last year, and our family really does like green beans. We actually really like canned green beans. I know a lot of people don't, but we do, and so I want to can a ton of green beans, so I'm gonna put more of these in. These are Blue Lake bush beans. Over here is where we harvested our cabbage. And when we harvested the cabbage, we did a really cool harvesting method where I twisted the plants and they broke off of their stalks, and I was just able to lift them out of the bed. Because of that, the mulch and soil and things in this bed really haven't been disturbed. They haven't intermingled. So I may add a little bit of this into the planting holes, but I also may not need to. I don't think I did with these beans right here, and they came up great and they're doing awesome. And in general, beans don't have a lot of nutrition needs. Obviously, you can't plant them in something completely sterile and expect them to do well, but beans themselves are nitrogen fixers. They like to add nitrogen into the soil where they're planted, and so these guys will do fine, probably without amendments. So I'll just move the mulch to the side, down to the soil, which is nice and moist. It's been really hot, but we've got a nice layer of mulch, and so the soil has been retaining its moisture, which is awesome. And because this is older seed, I think I purchased it in 2020. It's not old by any means, but seed does tend to lose its germination rate as the years go on, depending on how it's stored. But I have so many of these that I'm just gonna put a bunch. I have 5 or 6 that I'm dropping down into the holes, and so we can pretty much guarantee that we're going to get 1 plant in each of these holes. You can plant beans really, really close together. Actually, about 3 inches apart is pretty standard. I think that may be what is on the back of the seed pack, but I don't have the seed pack anymore. I'm not gonna plant them nearly that close. They're probably about 8 or 9 inches apart, and that is also fine. So these beans, I'm gonna put about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch down. Probably not this many per hole. Maybe I'll do that. And these are also going to germinate very, very quickly. Basically, anything does this time of year. Our night temperatures are in the 60s, and that is very good for germination. Once these beans and the corn germinate and get I don't know, about yay big. I will move this mulch back just so we can keep the soil cool and the moisture retention as optimal as possible. So we're not just planting seeds today, we are gonna harvest a few today as well. As I've mentioned, we're getting some rain this week, and I have noticed that some of these cabbage seed pods are nice and dry and brown and ready to harvest. And I'd like to do so before the rain, because what can happen when you get a lot of rain and these seed pods are super dry like this is they can get a little bit of a moldy spot on them, which really isn't the biggest deal. The biggest deal is that they can break open and all your seed falls down into the bed, which really isn't the goal when you're trying to harvest seed to keep it for later. So inside this nifty seed pod here are a whole bunch of seeds. There's probably at least 12 to 15 cabbage seeds in each pod. And so this plant is absolutely loaded with seed. And I'm only gonna be plucking off the ones that are brittle and dry, just like this one. And I can actually keep them in this pod just like this until I'm ready to plant. I won't be ready to plant these guys until fall time though. It's way too hot for cabbage right now. Actually, some of those broke apart as I was harvesting them. And so we can take a look at the seed. See these black seeds? These are absolutely mature and we will plant them this fall. And I will definitely be coming back here and harvesting more as these get ready. Most of these still have a little bit of life in them. They have a little bit of moisture. That one's ready, but I'll wait for the rest of them to dry out completely. All right, so I told you guys we'd check out the tomatoes. There are lots of little green tomatoes coming on. While I was out here pruning earlier, I noticed this one. I have a suspicion that these are the Black Beauty tomato. You can see the purpling coming on the shoulders already. I really, really love a good purple tomato. They almost have like a smoky flavor to them. So these guys are going to be green and purple until they mature, and then the bottom is going to flush to red. The tomatoes in the kids' garden are rivaling any tomato that I'm growing in my garden right now. Look at how big that is. Look at these. Isn't that incredible? I noticed while I was over here pruning too that these particular tomatoes are very, very prolific, or they have very, very heavy trusses. So a truss is this little flower stalk that's going to hold all of the tomatoes. And usually with like cherry type varieties, you'll see a lot of little flowers on each truss, but this is exceptional. Each one of these flowers has the potential to be a tomato. As you can see over here, they have a lot of potential to be a tomato. So just like those ground cherries that we showed in the beginning of the garden tour, all of the tomatoes in the kids' garden are volunteers. So they came up from seed that fell last season. And so all of these varieties are a surprise to us, and really they could be hybrid varieties. I grew Tigerella, which is what I suspect this plant is. I grew it last year, and I don't remember it putting this many fruits on each truss. It's just one of those things that can happen when genetics cross, and it's really cool to see. We've been keeping a very close eye on our thornless blackberry patch, and we see a couple of them are starting to turn, but they're not quite ready yet. And even when they turn completely black, they still might not have the best flavor. In theory, you should wait until the outside shiny kind of texture starts to dull a little bit, and they should have a more sugary kind of flavor instead of more like acid and tart. Also, if you were with me last year in the garden and you remember our bee balm plant blooming, do you remember if it was red or purple? Levi and I both remember red, and the bee balm flowers are opening now and the bees are loving them. There's actually one right here. But we distinctly remember these being red. which is weird. Also, the elderberry is past her peak. There are some blooms still left, but most of the little blooms are starting to turn into berries. See them here? They're definitely not ready until they're black, but they're well on their way. Do you see that bunny? That was a big rabbit. I don't know if I caught it on camera. I have my wide angle, like fisheye lens on, and sometimes it makes things too small to see, but there was a rabbit checking out the lane. So over here towards the back of our property, we have a new growing space to us. This is the lane. This is a 100-foot section of our farm that we decided we would plant instead of mow this year, and it is doing really well. But this kind of a situation, this tall grass, really does leave room for not only predators, because obviously that rabbit isn't a predator, but anything that might like to munch on our produce here could easily sneak in with a long grass situation like this. We are going to be mowing this really soon. It not only helps protect our goats from predators, I mean, because coyotes could sneak up within that long grass too, but it's going to help protect the garden and the greenhouse from rabbits and the like. Last year we had a possum eating our melons, but we let this particular grass go to seed this year so that we could get more of it hopefully next year. But that'll be coming down soon, and hopefully our produce over here will be okay. So as you can see, things are starting to be able to touch the trellis. I have been coming through and encouraging things to climb. A lot of things will reach up and search for a trellis. Some things will only kind of amble on the ground, and so I want to make sure that they are going to be growing upwards. These will probably get blown off tonight, but they may get their tendrils around it before that storm comes. See this little thing here? That is a tendril, and that is what those curlicues were on our birdhouse gourd and loofah gourd in the raised bed garden, and those guys will hang on tight and not allow that plant to blow off. This is some kind of melon. I can't remember everything I planted in the lane, but everything looks really good. These plants here in the lane have been one of those things that have grown inches every single day. I wish I knew what triggered that, because we really haven't gotten a whole lot of rain. I could have, assumed that it was all of the good things that are in the rainfall, but that has not been the case. In the last month, we've had one decent rain. It wasn't even really a good rain. It was only about 3/4 inches, and we like to see about an inch a week. That's about the bare minimum that I like to see for the garden. And so, I don't know, but I'll take it. These guys are going to be incredible if the bunnies don't eat them. Hi, Mochi. You want to come say hi? Come here. So this is the time of day that I really like to do my garden tours because the sun isn't so intense, but we're getting a storm coming. I can hear it on the horizon, so I've got to get in the greenhouse. So the greenhouse is really starting to fill in, which is a relief because it wasn't that long ago where it was looking pretty bare in here, which was a stark difference from what it was last year. But so far the beans and the squash in here are doing really well. Actually, these black-eyed peas that last week I was talking about how, I don't know if they're going to climb a trellis. They look kind of like they're going to be a bush variety. Well, this past week, like everything else, they have grown by inches, so I had to put up a trellis. This is actually my first time using a trellising system like this. This is just a very loose nylon type trellis, and I was, and still am, a little bit nervous that this isn't going to hold up super well to the wind. But it was very inexpensive, and so I went with it, and this is what we have. I have secured it with some fiberglass poles that we had from an old fence that was on our property when we first moved in. Sorry, the mosquitoes are officially out. Thank you, Kentucky. And then I secured everything with some tomato twine. So I am kind of known for my janky trellising. At times I've done quite a few things in this greenhouse. It's not horrible. I just worry a little bit with the weight and the wind and everything that maybe it won't hold up super long, but hopefully it does. See here, the beans have really started to lengthen out and search for something to climb. I believe black-eyed peas should grow about 4 feet tall. Right now, this guy's about 2 feet tall, so I mean, I could believe it. This bar here in the greenhouse is called a purlin, and a lot of people will use them to attach their trellising to, so that's what we did here. I noticed too that these black-eyed peas are starting to put their flowers on, so we'll be shelling peas in no time. I thought I had seen a couple pretty big patty pan squash here in these bushes a little bit earlier, and here they are. We have a visitor. Hi, handsome. Hi, sir. I've really been enjoying this Premier One netting and moving my boy goats around. I really like having them super close to where I am all the time. And this time of year, where I am all the time is near the garden spaces. And it is such a joy to have the boys right here. So right now it's only 76 in the greenhouse, and I think with the impending weather that we have, I do need to close up the greenhouse, and I have to do it sometimes in the summer when we have some severe weather blow in. The greenhouse does have some fail-safes for the wind. Let me put these down and I'll show you. So up here, every other one of these black lines here is a pole. That's a structure for the greenhouse. But every other one is actually wind strapping. You can actually see it better from out here. This is the wind strapping, and what this does is it will hold the plastic down when maybe the wind pressure from the inside is kind of a lot, so that it doesn't rip out of these tracks here. In a high wind situation, really the risk is that the plastic is probably going to rip more so than the entire greenhouse go tumbling. Each vertical pole that goes into the ground here is 2 feet in the ground, which really helps keep things stable. We purchased extra wind bracing, which is what this pipe is here. So it's secured into some of these posts on the end wall, and it will help keep it supported. This greenhouse has absolutely held up to some crazy weather situations, but when I know there's weather coming, I like to close everything up because it's going to be able to withstand high winds better when the wind is only on the outside putting pressure on the greenhouse instead of trying to whisk it from the inside. I don't want any wind blowing from the inside and pushing up. Hey pigs. Hey pigs. Hey boys. I'm just shutting the greenhouse. Hi. You love you boys. Don't, Feral. Close the other side. Hear the frogs down at the pond? It's how you know it's summertime. I don't even know when the first day of summer is. It has to be coming up. It's definitely been hot enough anyway. Well, now you're gonna say hi. Hello. Hello, boys. How are you? Grumpy? Hmm? There we go. Everything is shut up nice and tight. Because of that, though, I'm gonna have to make sure that I am out here bright and early, especially if the sun is shining in the morning, because it's going to get super hot in here with the sides down. So as I mentioned, we're getting some rain. We're getting a lot of rain all week long. So I thought everything grew really fast this week, and it's probably going to grow just as fast, if not faster, for next week. So thank you so much for seeing what the garden had to offer today. Wasn't a whole lot as far as harvests go, but we did put some seeds in the ground, and undeniably the big harvests are yet to come.